So, Mr. Giuliani, would you like to have a closing statement?
Sure, and I would like Jenna Ellis to conclude it. I'll be very brief. I'll just review the facts.
Thank you, sir.
We had a long and very disturbing day. I didn't expect things to be this bad, frankly. It's a much worse situation than I realized before I came here. The fraud is much more blatant, more wide open. The whole situation with the Dominion machine is really a national security problem. If you think about it carefully, it's not just Arizona's problem, it's Michigan's problem and Pennsylvania's problem, but it's also the United States problem, that our votes are going overseas, whether they're connected to China or Venezuela or not. These machines are wide open. China, Russia know how to take information from us from machines far more sophisticated than these extremely poorly constructed devices. And I remember 4 years ago we were really upset about the bogus charge of Russian collusion involving some emails that all turned out to be true. They weren't properly obtained, but the information in them turned out to be true, which people failed to realize. And the charge of Russian collusion turned out to be false. And now when we look back on it, the person who colluded with Russia was Hillary Clinton, and the person who got money from Russia was Joe Biden. Now we're facing not a false charge of collusion. We're facing multiple charges in multiple states of a unheard of in our history invasion of our sacred right to vote. We had a long, long session today, difficult session, and it began and ended pretty much the same way. It began with the colonel pointing out that the Dominion machines that you were using in Maricopa might as well just been wide open computers that anybody could hack into, anybody had access to. And just in case it was hard to do it, there's plenty of testimony that despite the fact that they said there were no connections to the internet, your counting rooms and voting rooms were filled with internet connections. And just in case, you might remember that chart on the wall that I can't understand with all those arrows and things like that. That's the traffic that was going on from your voting machines and your calculating machines to the rest of the world. So there's scientific proof that they were communicating hundreds of thousands of times, if not more, which is totally inconsistent with the idea that a voting machine is, as you said, Mr. Chairman, it should be a self-contained unit. The votes go in that box, and they remain in that box. And no one can have access to it except the officials who are going to count the vote. And then it should remain there so we can audit it. It shouldn't be able to be changed the way it was here. We showed you how they changed it in those 2 elections in Michigan. They just switched the vote after it was over. Well, if they did it in Michigan, you've got to find out if they did it in Arizona. You can't certify this vote and not know just the extent to which Dominion changed the vote. That's their expertise. That's what they do. The reason we can't prove to you the full extent of it is because your state government will not make available the machines. You make the machines available to Phil, I bet he can get you an answer in 3-4 days. Right, Phil? Am I be too ambitious? No, sir. 3 or 4 days. So I challenge the governor, who doesn't want to meet with me, maybe meet with Phil and turn over the machines. And let Phil see, are we telling the truth when we say they stole the vote from President Trump? But we don't even have to rely on that. I asked, you might note, all your witnesses, our witnesses, your witnesses, I asked them to do the best they could to estimate the number of ballots that went through, mail ballots that went through without any observation by a Republican. Because that's completely illegal. That's the central part of their conspiracy, because they did that in every other state. They did it in Pennsylvania. They did it in Michigan. They did it in Nevada. They did it in Wisconsin. And they did it in Georgia. It can't be an accident that they did the same thing. And they did it in the big cities where they could manipulate the vote better, not in the whole state. Same plan, same pattern, same thing. So in
Pennsylvania, it turns out to be about 827,000 votes that were entered into the box without a single Republican around. And, you know, they could have been cast all by Mickey Mouse. We have no idea. Those votes are completely null and void. Under the law of Wisconsin, votes like that are completely null and void. And I just did a quick count. I counted up 769,903 that these witnesses estimated went through without their being able to observe, as the law requires, and I believe due process requires. And I think we'll be able to show that to the Supreme Court. It was 35,000 for Ann Orth. It was Elizabeth Harris, 22,903, and then another 130,000. Then about 120,000 for Janice Bryant. Leslie Minkus, approximately 100,000, 55 tables. Judith, I'm forgetting Judith's last name here, 162,000, and Kathleen Alvey, 200,000. You can go back and check that. My arithmetic may be a little off, but it's somewhere between 750 and 800,000 votes. I'm sorry, that's a lot of votes. That goes beyond just determining the election between Trump and Biden. That's over. That's 10 million. That's 10,000 votes. This is having stolen an election from the people of Arizona. And they're going to say, well, if you cancel out the 769 votes,
769,000 votes, you're denying them the right to vote. No, you're not. You're reaffirming the right to vote of your other 4 million people who cast an honest ballot. We don't even know if these people exist. And I'm sure some of them don't even exist. So we're going to deprive living human beings of their franchise in order to preserve the franchise of people who maybe don't exist, maybe are illegal, maybe are felons, or maybe voted 10 times. There's no way to know. They completely flaunted the law and put us in a position where we have to conclude that these ballots are null and void. So I know it's really tough. Sometimes I know what you're facing because we face it every day. We face horrible threats, ridiculous things said about us. I have now come to the conclusion that I'm proud that I'm called those names by people like that. It makes me very proud of myself, and I think my mother and father, who both are dead but taught me to be a patriotic American, are proud of me also. So I don't really give a damn what they say. But I know you're like that too. I know you're all like that too, or you wouldn't be here. But you got a lot of colleagues that are not. And they're not necessarily bad people. They're people who want to make a living. They're people who don't want their families harassed. They're people that want the opportunity to just, get by every day and do something good. You got to convince them that this thing that we have, liberty and freedom and the right to vote and freedom of religion and freedom of speech, it's under attack all the time. From the beginning of our republic until now, it's under attack. Sometimes foreign enemies, sometimes domestic enemies, sometimes a combination of both. And it's impossible to tell who gets called upon to make sacrifices. You think of all the young men and women we've lost overseas. They were called upon to make a sacrifice, and other young men and women weren't. Well, right now, you're being called upon to make the sacrifice. The members of this legislature. The Constitution of the United States put the finger on you. Our founding fathers put the finger on you. You're our salvation. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution puts the finger of responsibility in preserving our right to vote on the legislature of Arizona. Not your governor, thank goodness. Not your Secretary of State, even more thank goodness. But it puts it on you. And for those who are afraid, Look, I've dealt with human beings that I had to convince to testify against the Sicilian mafia. I had to get them to testify against the 5 families. Had to get them to testify against Joe Bonanno in Tucson, Arizona.
Yes, sir, you
where
did.
the nuns actually threw me out of the hospital because he built the hospital. And I've sat there with men crying, and worse than that, because they felt they were going to die doing it. But they found the courage to do it, and after they did it, they felt so much better about themselves. What I would say to my colleagues is, and I mean this in the generic sense, just be a man or a woman, not a sniveling coward. You'll feel so much better. You'll feel so much better about yourself. There's nothing that elevates you more than an act of courage. And there's nothing that demeans you more than an act of cowardice. See if you can convince them of that. We need it so badly. And I can't say enough about all of you, about your courage, Mark in particular, Sonny, and all of you. Leo, Nancy, I got to see all the rest there. Brett? Oh, you're covering your name. What are you? Come on, be like Jan Hancock. Be the first one to sign. Kelly, David, and Sylvia. You're also all very, very good questioners, very intelligent, and very, very properly motivated. And I'm counting on you to find me a whole bunch of others in the legislature just like you, or turn them into you.